Hello friends, welcome to the video which describes cells of immune system. So what are the cells of immune system? Cells of immune system are all those blood cells which help in defending our body from the antigens and from the foreign particle which tries to enter our body. So as you all know, blood cells arise from bone marrow. Bone marrow is a soft tissue which is situated inside the longest bone of our body. That soft tissue is responsible for producing lot amount of blood cells. It is having stem cell known as hematopoietic stem cell. This stem cell produces two different kind of cells, lymphoid progenitor cells and myeloid progenitor cells. Now these cells have a special property of defending the body from the pathogen that is trying to enter. Stem cells, as you all know, all the stem cells have the property of differentiating one cell into many kind of cells. And such a stem cells we possess in our body that is just able to produce only different kind of blood cells. Those kind of blood cells are lymphoid and myeloid progenitor cells. Amongst the blood cells, RBCs, they are only responsible for transporting oxygen and carbon dioxide throughout our body. They are not at all responsible for defending our body from any kind of pathogen. Apart from RBCs, the rest of the cells are, as you can see here, the lymphoid cells include B cells, T cells, NK cells, and dendritic cells, whereas the myeloid include RBCs, basophils, eosinophils, macrophages, monocytes, dendritic cells, mast cells, and platelets. The dendritic cells which you are able to see here, they are involved in both kinds of cells. Why? Because they act as a messenger between lymphoid and myeloid progenitor cells. What are lymphoid progenitor cells? Lymphoid means they are lymphocytes. The cells that are developed from lymphoid progenitor cells are known as lymphocytes. Now what are those? Those cells are having only one nucleus and they are responsible for adaptive immunity. As we have discussed in the previous video, about innate and adaptive immunity, the cells which are present here, which you can see here, they are responsible for adaptive immunity. And the cells which you can see here, apart from RBC, are responsible for innate immunity. So this is the difference between myeloid and lymphoid. These cells show the innate immune response, and these cells show the adaptive immune response. The response which is very strong and long-lasting response will be shown by the lymphoid progenitor cells. Now let's see what are the lymphocytes which we need to study. Those are dendritic cells, T cells, B cells, and NK cells. NK means natural killer cells. The dendritic cell always appear in this way. The projections which you can see here, they are responsible for presenting antigen to other cells. T cells. Here you can see T cells with lot of membrane proteins. These are receptors. Receptors are made of proteins. B cells, you can see here B cells, and NK cell. The natural killer cell is having a receptor which is used for presenting antigen to other cells. Then let's see the B cells. What are the B cells? The first cells of lymphocytes which we are going to discuss in detail is B cells. Why the name is given in such a way B? Because they mature in bone marrow, also they arise from bone marrow. The bone marrow which you can see here, they arise and develop in the bone marrow itself. After developing, they just get dissolve, they just secrete in the blood. They move after interaction with antigen. These cells get divided into plasma cells and memory cells. Memory cells will allow the body to detect the antigen when it is trying to enter the body next time. So as soon as the antigen is entering the body next time, the memory cells will detect that antigen and prepare our body to fight against it without harming our body. Our body will never get harmed. So this is the importance of memory cells. And plasma cells are responsible for producing antibodies. The only cells in the entire body that is responsible for producing antibodies is plasma cells. The cells which are derived from B cells. These plasma cells will produce antibodies. Antibodies are of 5 types. These antibodies will help in targeting the antigen which is trying to enter the body. And also B cells have a special property that they will present the antigen to T cells. What are T cells? T means thymus. They arise from bone marrow, but they develop in thymus. After developing in thymus, they just revolve in the lymph, the fluid lymph, right? T cell receptor binds to antigen. There will be a receptor on T cells that will bind to the antigen, and they will help in eliminating cancer cells, antigen-presenting cells, and virus-infected cells. T cells are divided into T helper cells and T cytotoxic cells. There are 2 types of T cells, helper and cytotoxic. Now, helper again have 4 types of cells known as Th1, Th2, Th17, and Th. Let us discuss all these cells in detail. Th1 will attack on intracellular pathogens, the pathogens which are inside the cell. Th2, extracellular, the pathogens which are outside the cell. Th17, they secrete interleukin 17, which will attack on fungi. And Th, they will help the B cell to develop in the germinal centers of the body. Germinal centers are reproductive organs of our body, and the B cell development happens there with the help of TFH cells. Then let's discuss what are the cytotoxic T cells. Even they attack on intracellular pathogens, but how? They won't attack on pathogens, but they will attack on the cell that is infected with a pathogen. They will attack on the cell that is infected with a pathogen. Also, they will stimulate these cells to produce antibodies. And the macrophages are the cells which help the cytotoxic T cells to get activated. Macrophages, they belong to innate immunity. And these cells will activate the cytotoxic T cells. Then what are natural killer cells? Natural killer cells have some perforins and granzymes. These are the enzymes released by the natural killer cells to attack the antigen. They are very special. They have a special property to kill the cancerous and virus infected cells. And they have special property to identify them without any previous exposure. They can identify their enemies without knowing even them. Also, they will have a receptor, membrane receptor CD16. This receptor is responsible to bind only to one single antibody, that is IgG. And after binding to that antibody, it will kill the target with the help of IgG. Let's discuss the last one, dendritic cells. They arise from both the lineages, myeloid and lymphoid, as discussed earlier. And the special property of dendritic cells is they'll present the antigen to T cells. The very special property you need to remember is antigen presenting cells. Express high levels of class 2 MHC molecules. Because of this only, they are able to identify the antigen very easily. Then let's move with myeloid progenitor cells. And the first one is neutrophils. Neutrophils are the cells which have three-lobed nucleus. The nucleus will be lobed in this way, and the cytoplasm will be full of granules. These granules have special property to kill the bacteria. After they are produced, they circulate in the blood for 7 to 10 hours and then enter the tissues. After just being produced, they circulate in the blood for 7 to 10 hours and then they enter the tissues. Why they enter the tissues? In order to destroy the antigen, if any present over there in the tissues. And the entry of these cells into the tissue is known as extravasation. 50 to 70% of WBC cells are filled with neutrophils. The next, eosinophils, bilobed. Only 2 lobes are there in the nucleus. 2 to 5% of WBCs will make eosinophils. They will migrate from blood to tissue, attack on protozoa, the only WBCs which will attack on protozoa and helminths by releasing cationic peptides and reactive oxygen species. Basophils have lobed nucleus. Thus, they make 1% of WBC. They are non-phagocytic but release substances that are allergic. Once they come in contact with any kind of antigen, what they do is they release some kind of chemicals such as prostaglandins or histamine, serotonin or leukotrienes. What these enzymes or chemicals will do is they'll try to attack on that antigen in such a way that they'll degrade even our body cells. So sometimes allergic reaction will also harm us. And high affinity for only IgE antibody. These cells will just attach themselves with IgE antibody. Next, mast cells. They are produced by bone marrow and releases in undifferentiated state. All the cells will release in differentiated state, but only these cells will release which will get released in undifferentiated state until they reach tissue. After they reach tissue, they get differentiated in many kind of cells maybe. Large number of cytoplasmic granules containing histamine. Mast cells will have large number of granules and those granules will contain histamine. Another cells which give allergic reaction. Monocytes. Monocytes are mononuclear phagocytes. Phagocytes means they'll just engulf the antigen. They'll not produce any kind of chemical or anything, but what they'll do is they'll take the antigen inside the cell. After reaching tissue, they form macrophage or dendritic cell. When they are in the blood, they will be in monocytic stage only, but when they reach the tissue, they'll change their form into macrophage or dendritic cells. And they'll remain in blood for 8 hours. See, this is the monocyte, which is not having any kind of pseudopodia. When monocyte enters the tissue, the pseudopodia is developed and also the size of the cell increases. This pseudopodia will help the antigen to get inside the cell. And once it is inside the cell, it will kill the antigen and remove the antigenic particles outside the cell. That is all about cells of immune system. Please like and subscribe our video for future help.